The Grand Finals of the OWC World Cup 2015 were a monumentous event in the history of the game. It's probably hard to remember exactly why, beyond it being the first win that America had ever gotten, and some players are too new to have watched or even heard of the match before. Let's run through why this event is so important for OWC. It seems very obvious now that the United States is one of the strongest, if not the strongest country in the world of OWC. Whether it be in solo rankings or tournaments, you're bound to run into a dozen or more highly skilled players who all hail from the same nation. That wasn't always the case though. In fact, for a long time, there was never more than 2 or 3 American players in the top 50, and in the World Cups, the US often struggled to even make it to the quarterfinals. So what happened that changed them from average performers to one of the most highly revered tournament teams ever assembled? Since the dawn of OWC, there was one region that always dominated every aspect of the game: Asia. The majority of top players for the longest time were from South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and China. There are also many outliers from this all around the globe, but by and large, Asia made up most of the player base since basically the beginning of the game. This is no surprise since rhythm games have always been more popular in the region than in North America or Europe. Around 2013 to 2015 though, a change started to happen. OWC started to spread much more in the Western world for a multitude of reasons. Many OWC streamers started to gain popularity on Twitch around this time, and some very popular non-OWC streamers would share the game with their viewers. Videos of the game would be recommended on YouTube and further find more players. Just as OWC had originally garnered a player base, it spread to a whole new audience, simply by word of mouth. Within a year or two, the US as well as other non-Asian areas saw a massive influx of players who kept playing the game and had worked their way to the top. The roster for America had mostly new faces for OWC 2015. Natalia and Zilver, who participated in the previous year, were joined by Xarius, Ritze, Solus, 0120, Zodiac, and Toy, who before their first World Cup appearance had all worked their way up to the low hundreds in rank, some even to top 50. This abundance of top-notch players was just what the US needed to even come close to matching up to any Asian country. The stars started to align when Japan, the previous world champions, were knocked out in the round of 32 at the very start of the tournament. The United States beat Taiwan in a close game, 5-4, and then Brazil, 5-2, but then for the semifinals faced 3-time world champions and all-round beast team, South Korea. With luck and skill both on their side, the US crushed them 6-2. All that was left now in the winners bracket was one team, China. Their team included some of the best tournament players around to this day: Matsumoto Rise, Russ Bell, Spring Lane, Disan, GGBY, Wadzia Name, Rixia Mao, and Toshinyo Kyoko. Scarier yet was the record: no close games, only wins by a wide margin. Just like you would have expected, the match ended in a victory for the Chinese team, 6-3. The US weren't going to give up though. They had already made it farther than in any year before and weren't satisfied with bronze. They were knocked into the losers bracket and faced Poland, where they were able to capture a win 6-3 there, along with a guaranteed minimum finish of 2nd place. Because of how the tournament is structured for the OWC World Cup, to come back from the top of losers, you must win one game against the other team to knock them down to the losers bracket, and then another to determine the overall winner. So now the United States had to win 2 consecutive games against China. One win for China, no matter how close, meant a loss for the US, and so it began. On the night of December 12, 2015, the two countries faced off on the most challenging map pool of the entire tournament. With the odds against them, the United States took what China had done to them in the finals and turned it around with a score of 7-2, making it the first game of the Grand Finals and also the first game that China had lost in the entire tournament. In the second game, both teams desperately tried their hardest to get the OWC 2015 gold, and neither were going to go down without a fight. Giving it their all, China was the first team to reach match point, 6-4, with a lead of 2 rounds, so any round the US dropped would mean a definite Chinese victory. Then the score became 6-5, then 6-6. Picking up right where they left off, the United States brought it right to tiebreaker in the final game of Grand Finals. The map that they played was Furioso Melodia, one of the most challenging maps in the game, both then and now. The US had had some problems with failing, which led to lost points, and China's comeback in this match was very alarming to them. Nerves were running high for both teams, and the round began. Keeping all this in mind, I encourage you to go and watch a VOD of the tiebreaker to see for yourself how close and tense this final moment of the tournament was. The scores of both teams stayed extremely close for the entire map until the very ending. A last-minute clutch from each of the US members and break from Rustfell sealed the fate of the match, and the United States emerged from the map shaken and nervous, but also victorious, with a score of 7-6. For the first time in OWC World Cup history, a non-Asian team had won, and that trend continued. We've only seen North American and European champions since that moment almost 4 years ago from recording this. This was truly a turning point for competitive OWC, where a freshly assembled team of relatively new players, against all likelihood, were able to take down a giant. They challenged the reign of Asia over the competitive scene, and in turn took it by storm. Of course, this single match wasn't a catalyst of the demographics change in OWC, it was a result of it, and probably the most prominent at that. Regardless, the match lives on as the start of the United States' long-lasting world champion status in one of the strongest OWC tournament teams ever put together.
USA is gonna be your 2015 OWC World Cup victors!